Welcome to Ride Ohio, discovering new rides in Ohio.
Talented tattoo artist. He was well liked by everyone. But we called him Scurvy George because he drank a pint or more of Old Crow every day and didn't take care of himself. He ended up dying from cirrhosis, still a young man. At the funeral, his wife told me I could have the tattoo business if I wanted it. She had no desire to keep it running. The shop had an established reputation. I took over the lease and inherited a centrifuge and a few black swivel chairs. Tom Heath was a tattoo artist by trade, and it seemed natural to partner with him. Although he wasn't the most trustworthy member in the world, he did know the business. I put up the money for equipment and ads, and Tom handled the ink. I also sold t-shirts through a free ad in Easy Riders. Joe Teresi owned the magazine and was a friend of the club's. Having Hell's Angels ads in the magazine gave Easy Riders authenticity in the outlaw world. I started with a shirt that had "fuck off" written across the chest in 100-point letters, and it became wildly popular. Sonny Barger sold free Sonny Barger t-shirts the same way to help fund his defense against criminal charges. My martial arts practice grew as I became more accomplished, and I turned that into a business as well, eventually opening a small martial arts studio and an affiliated equipment and supplies operation. My businesses suited outlaw life. I could work day or night, leaving me free to handle club business whenever I had to. That was good because in the summer of 1978, I had a lot of Hell's Angels business to handle. Law enforcement was still putting the pressure on in the months following Ray's murder. Several agencies were monitoring Southern California charters. I came up with an idea to counteract that pressure. The Satan slaves were about to patch over and become the San Fernando Valley Hells Angels. I saw it as a golden opportunity. Cops can't tell one Hells Angel from another unless they know the writer. Police at the time used field interrogation cards for traffic stops. They'd write down your name, nickname, license plate, club affiliation, and identifying features, such as distinctive patches on your cut or tattoos. The notes were kept on 3x5 index cards in pen. They would be copied and used as mini files all street cops could carry and reference. It gave local law enforcement a way to tell at a glance who was writing where. If I moved the charter from Glendale to Ventura, I'd screw up the system. Cops who stopped SFV members that they thought were LACO Hells Angels would be talking to somebody who had nothing to do with Ray Glore or the Mongols. LACO would get a fresh start, far away from those field interrogation cards. After I made the decision, I set up a meeting with the remaining question marks. Jesse and I rode down to Ventura in a sign of respect to old friends. When a new Hells Angels charter opens, the standard protocol is to clear out any other clubs in the area, one way or another. I wasn't about to do that to the question marks, but they had done it themselves. There were only 4 members in the question marks' sad little clubhouse when I stood up to speak. Look, here's what's going on. You probably heard that the slaves are becoming Hells Angels. I want you guys to become angels too. We're moving LACO to Ventura. We want you to join. If not, we're going to shut you down. Stay like you are, that's fine. David Ortega would be the only one who would get it together enough to prospect for Ventura. It was a bittersweet pill for David, one that he would never entirely swallow. David had been a core member of an established and respected one-percenter club when I was just an independent. Now, not only was he starting all over as a Hells Angels prospect, even when he patched in, he'd always answer to me in the chain of command. David was one of my closest friends and a true brother, but because of the way things worked out, it would always be a love-hate relationship. We had already rented Lee Stanley's old shop on Fixway in Ventura when I rode up to announce the move at the monthly officers' meeting. It nearly came to blows. Old Guard veterans were beside themselves. You can't change your fucking name. We already have. There were too many negatives associated with LACO. It's a done deal. We're Ventura now. In hindsight, it was a ballsy move. We were struggling to maintain the 6-member minimum necessary to qualify as a charter. The rule regarding the charter size has been around for a long time and is important to the club. In the outlaw world, numbers equal strength. The more members a charter has, the more powerful it is inside and outside the club. Charters are also recruiting centers. Members bring in hang-arounds and prospects. With too few members, the charter has no profile and starts to look less than legitimate. It shines badly on the Hells Angels at large. Outlaw territory being what it is, there is usually another charter in the region that can absorb an undersized charter's members. So the club would have been within their rights to shut us down. Even with Richmond and Daly City on our side, there was no predicting how Frisco, San Jose, Dago, and Purdue might vote. But I survived the meeting. Now I was president of a brand new charter that I could build the way I envisioned. As the head of a small charter, you have hands-on responsibility for everything. Presidents of big heritage charters like Oakland and Frisco are political players who coordinate. They tell people what to do. I was a working president. I knew I had to be ready to take care of business, to get my hands dirty. It didn't take long to be put to the test. There's no way to accurately describe how important a Hells Angel Death Head patch is to a member. It's everything. Your whole identity is wrapped up in this little bit of dyed cotton stitched to leather or denim. The patch trumps your motorcycle, your house, and your possessions. In many ways and circumstances, it comes before your family. It is a bright red and white mark of what you stand for, the good and the bad. The Hells Angel patch is carte blanche, a ticket to privilege, women, money, and status. It opens doors. It commands respect. But you're an idiot if you don't understand it's also a bright target for law enforcement and other clubs. Because of all that, there is no bigger sin than to disrespect the patch. You don't touch another man's patch. You don't misplace your own. But even more of a crime, potentially a capital offense, is to wear a false patch. Just as the Ventura Charter was settling in, we got word of a bogus death head. A woman from San Francisco had been visiting friends and partying in San Fernando Valley. She met a guy who said he was a Hells Angel, but wasn't wearing his cut. Instead, he had it draped over his arm, something she knew no angel would do. He was moving coke and pills at the party, and the girl got the sense that he was more drug dealer than outlaw. Unfortunately for him, she knew a lot of angels in the Bay Area and knew how they carried themselves. When she got home, she headed to a local bar and clued in several members who were there. She told him this guy just smelled wrong, too showy and full of shit. We got a call from the Bay Area asking us to check into it. We put out feelers in the valley and had people ask around at bars and parties. It wasn't long before we found out who this guy was. We quickly put together solid intel, including his name, address, and the license numbers of his car and motorcycles. We knew everything except where the bogus patch was. 2 angels from the Bay Area came down as backup. Although Jesse still had a pending case and should have kept his head down, there was no one that I trusted more. So he and I went out in 2 cars with the Bay Area members and prowled the valley bars the drug dealer frequented. At around 6 in the evening, we drove by a bar and made his license plate. I used a Slim Jim to break into the dumpy brown Ford 4-door. I lay down across the backseat footwell and put a blanket over me. I had brought a .22 with the serial numbers filed down and a homemade silencer screwed to the barrel. I waited for about an hour, but what seemed like 10 days sweating under the wool blanket. Then boots crunched across the gravel parking lot coming toward the car. The drug dealer opened the door and slid into the driver's seat. Someone else plunked down into the passenger seat. As soon as the door slammed shut, I pulled myself up and shoved the business end of the silencer up against the back of the driver's head. The passenger turned, saw the gun, and stiffened in shock. Oh my God. He recognized me. He was a member of the Devil's Disciples, a small second-tier 1%er club. He said, "Hey man, I'm just going to get out." I shook my head. "You know I can't let you out." "I swear I won't say anything." "You know better than that. Put your hands on the dash where I can see them." The passenger did what I told him to do, and I pushed on the gun. "Now you asshole, put your hands on the wheel at 2 and 10. I reached around and frisked the dealer for a weapon. "I came here to get the patch. Just take me to the patch and that's all I want." But the driver wanted to play. "I don't know what you're talking about, man." The outlaw world has a lot of lowlifes, and it always amazed me that they couldn't do simple math. Trying to bullshit a Hell's Angel who's found his way to your backseat and is holding a silenced semi-auto behind your ear is a whole new level of stupid. You don't know what I'm talking about. Okay, motherfucker, let's go. Start the car. He fired up the engine. Where are we going? I'll tell you where. I guided him to a quiet side street a couple blocks away. The guys in the two cars followed us. We transferred our two prisoners to the car Jesse was driving, handcuffing them and putting the drug dealer in the front passenger seat and his friend in the back seat behind Jesse. One of the Bay Area Angels took my gun and slid into the back seat right behind the drug dealer. The other Angel and I got into the follow car. We headed onto I-5 and started climbing the Grapevine, the stretch of freeway that rises into the mountains right past Fort Tejon. We took a minor exit and started driving east, out into the desert on a lonely two-lane road. I was following Jesse at a discreet distance when a highway patrol cruiser pulled in behind him and lit him up. I wasn't sure what we were going to do. I found out later that the Angel in the back seat told the two prisoners, "If you say one word, I'm going to shoot that cop right in the face, and I'm going to shoot you both in the head. Then we're going to torch the car and leave it here." It was the late 70s, and cop cruisers weren't computerized. This cop pulled over 4 dangerous-looking guys on a dark, deserted road. It wouldn't have taken a genius to see that something was going down. If the cop had any sense, he understood that he was the one risking the most. "Where are you guys headed?" "Just going to see some friends." Jesse didn't offer his license. The other 3 didn't even look in the cop's direction, and they all had jackets over their laps covering their hands. It couldn't have looked any worse to this cop. He hesitated for half a minute, then told Jesse he was free to go. Jesse later told me that cop knew something was going on, but he didn't want no part of it. We kept driving, out almost 30 miles. We didn't even know where we were, just deep in the desert. The sun was going down when we drove off the road about a half mile out into the sand. Everyone got out. The air smelled fresher and cleaner than it did in the valley. It was still a little warm from the day. It was quiet enough to hear the click as one of the Bay Area guys uncuffed the drug dealer. Jesse got a shovel out of the trunk and threw it at the dealer's feet. "Start digging." I expected the guy to crumble and spill his guts. Instead, the moron picked up the shovel and started digging his own grave. The ringing slice of a shovel edge cutting into desert sand has got to be one of the loneliest sounds on Earth. All of us were lost in our thoughts. I was facing up to what I was going to have to do. Hell's Angels don't bluff. This was the ugly part to being committed. You carried things as far as they needed to go. But killing somebody in the middle of the desert is a clear line, and it's a line that you don't step back over. In a way, I felt as trapped as that idiot with the shovel. He kept at it until he had carved out a crude depression roughly big enough for his body and about 1.5 feet deep. "Okay, that's enough. Now dig the second one." The devil's disciple snapped to attention. "Wait a minute. You said I was coming back with you." "Sorry, man. I can't bring you back. You know that. But if it's any consolation, he's going to dig the hole for you. Just relax and enjoy the sunset. It's the last one either of you is going to see." The drug dealer drove the shovel into the sand next to the first hole, paused, then finally broke down. He started shaking and sobbing. "What would you do if I told you I had the patch?" Jesse and I exchanged looks. "Well, what we'd do is we'd head back and get the patch. Then you'd have to pay a tax. But you goddamn well better stop wasting our time. Do you have the patch or not?" The dealer looked down into the hole he had just dug. "I've got it at my house." We put the two back in the car and drove back to the valley. The drug dealer directed Jesse to his house and I followed. We stopped at an unlit corner about a block away. I told the devil's disciple to get out. As soon as he opened the door, I grabbed his arm. "You know I'll come for you if I ever hear anything about this, right? I wouldn't run my mouth. You'll never hear a word, I swear." He looked as happy as I've ever seen someone look. We parked both cars and followed the drug dealer in through the front door of a crappy little ranch house. I made sure I was close enough that he couldn't grab a stashed gun. I held the .22 on him as he rummaged around in his closet and pulled out the fake patch. He presented it to me like a gift, like that was going to make it all right. That's not how the Angels do things. One of the Bay Area guys was packing a taser. He was so pissed off when he saw how much effort had gone into this fake patch, how detailed and convincing it was, that he tased the dealer. The guy let out a high-pitched squeal, dropped to the floor, and started flopping around like a fish out of water. We pulled out the taser probes none too gently. The guy with the taser was right back in the dealer's face, threatening him with another zap. "What else you got here?" This is the outlaw way. When the situation warrants taking anything, you take everything. We didn't just tax him, we cleaned this guy out. He had $30,000 in cash hidden around the house, and we found 2 kilos of high-quality coke in a false compartment under his sink. We took all his jewelry, rings, watches, bracelets, and chains. We even found a couple of handguns. It was a memorable haul. 2 hours later, the 4 of us sat at a table in the back of the best restaurant in Ventura, enjoying steak and lobster. We cut lines of coke with a steak knife on the bottom of an upside-down saucer. Ultimately, we sent half the drugs and money back up to the Bay Area and threw all the jewelry on the bar in the Ventura clubhouse. Members could take whatever they wanted. I wasn't a jewelry guy, so I didn't take any of it. Unexpected bounty is great, but for me, the real reward was that I wasn't forced to shoot 2 men on a cold desert night. I had felt cornered with no options. I was relieved, but it also made clear to me that I wasn't cool with casual killing. I didn't mind if it stood for something, but killing for stupidity didn't sit well with me. It was the first time I realized that I was meant to be a peacemaker, not an assassin. That set me apart from many Hells Angels. It was an identity I would come to embrace at no small cost. 8. Hosting runs and parties is a way for a new charter to establish credibility and for the charter's leadership to develop power and influence. The bigger and better the party, the more locked down you are in the eyes of the club. For charters such as Oakland and Frisco, putting together a wild New Year's Eve party or run to Colorado is business as usual. But I knew that a successful large run could be Ventura's coming out party, as long as it was a party to remember. In the summer of 1978, Ventura organized a run to McGrath State Beach in Oxnard. McGrath is a lush strip of watershed along the Pacific Ocean, just 10 miles south of Ventura. The park has spectacular campgrounds and water wherever you look. The Santa Clara River feeds into one end, and there's not a bad seat in the house. McGrath was ideal because it was secluded enough to ensure privacy, but located near enough to Highway 1 for easy access from everywhere. Hundreds of bikers rode in, including members from every Hells Angel charter in California and several from out of state. Along with the drinking, drugs, sex, music, friendly fistfights, and exhibitions of bike riding skills, there was a lot of talk around the bonfire. Most of the buzz was about the Mongols' war, but there was also a lot of discussion about the older war with the Outlaws. In 1969, Sandy Alexander was a New York City outlaw, president of the Aliens Motorcycle Club. He rode to Oakland to make his case for the aliens patching over into a new Hells Angels charter. Alexander told me that while he was away, fellow alien Peter Greased Lightning Rogers had taken liberties with Alexander's wife. Rogers took off to Florida before Sandy got back, and Sandy, understandably, swore revenge. His chance came in 1974, when Rogers, now wearing an Outlaws patch, returned to New York City to visit friends. Sandy heard through the grapevine that Rogers was in town and tracked him down. He beat the outlaw to the doorstep of death. Rogers slunk home and told the Outlaws that he had gotten rat-packed by the entire New York charter. His injuries were severe enough to make the lie credible. The Outlaws took their revenge when 2 Lowell, Massachusetts Hells Angels, Edwin Riverboat Wiley and George Whiskey George Hartman, visited an ex-Hells Angel in Florida to check that the former member had blacked out his club tattoos. The 3 were lured into an outlaw bar under the pretense of a friendly drink between respective clubs. The Angels were beaten, tied up, driven to a quarry, and executed. Within a year, outlaw Big Jim Nolan was on the run with several other club officers, being chased by law enforcement and angry Hells Angels. The talk at McGrath focused on how both wars started over women. Two wars that didn't look like they would ever end. In the outlaw world then, there was no such thing as a peacemaker. One killing led inevitably to another. Truces were painfully rare and amazingly fragile. The conversations around the bonfire put a lot of ideas into my head as the run wrapped up. The run was exactly what the charter needed. The only black mark had been, as usual, the cops. Several agencies joined forces to harass anyone on a motorcycle within 20 miles. You couldn't find a patch wearer who hadn't been pulled over at least once on the long two-lane highway that led to the park. The cops took their time, detaining club members on the side of the road for an hour or more, under the pretense of license plates mounted incorrectly and other nonsense. I lost count of how many different badges were staking out the park. It was absurd and annoying. On his way back to Oakland, Sonny Barger got pulled over. Sonny had a temper and never backed down. Because it was yet another bullshit stop and a weekend of them, and a completely trumped-up charge, he refused to sign the ticket. The cop arrested him and took him to Ventura's jail. Oakland legend Cisco Valderrama and I headed back to Ventura to arrange for Sonny's bond. We met with the bondsman, arranged bail, and waited for Sonny to be processed out. We drank coffee in a diner across from the jail and made small talk. Out of the blue, Cisco dropped a bomb on me. You ever thought about coming up to the Bay Area? I took a minute because what he was saying was a huge compliment. They only wanted the best of the best in Oakland. Look, Cisco, I want to be a Hells Angel like you, like Sonny and Angelo. I think we need angels like that down here. I think I can be that Hells Angel for Ventura. It was exactly what I felt. Southern California needed to assert itself. We needed to carve out our own identity. After all, we were the home of Purdue, the charter that started it all. We needed to remember that. Cisco nodded his big head, wearing his signature shades over his Fu Manchu mustache. Well, you know you got a home, if you ever want to come up there. Thanks, Cisco. I appreciate it, man. The run and that talk left me with a lot to consider. Everything was made a little more complicated by a fascinating bit of information that came to me through a back channel a week after the run. I had contacts in the Dirty Dozen, a one-percenter club in Arizona that would eventually patch over to become Hells Angels. They gave me the address where Big Jim Nolan was hiding out in Arizona. It was an easy opportunity to up Ventura's profile and serve the club in a big way. I could make a difference and possibly end a long war. There was no telling how long the address would be valid. I had to jump at the chance or let it go. 2 days later, I packed my car with a black nylon travel bag and a scope-equipped M14, an all-purpose sniper rifle. I drove to Phoenix, Arizona. It took me forever to find the neighborhood. When I got there, I discovered a sad little corner of the suburban world, a failed subdivision in the middle of nowhere. Half the houses were empty, with sun-faded for sale signs stuck in the middle of overgrown, weed-infested front lawns. Most of the houses needed paint, with a few broken windows and fewer signs of life. Except at the address I'd been given. It was so clearly a biker hangout that I almost had to laugh. Biker houses often look just like biker clubhouses. This one was no different. The plain, single-level tract house had a split-rail fence around a scabby front yard. The lawn was just patches of baked dirt and weeds. The house was a faded lime green with dirty white trim, and the garage stuck out in front like a chin waiting to be hit. The driveway was cracked, and an old, dust-encrusted black Cadillac limousine was parked at an angle across the sidewalk. Harleys clustered in the street and the driveway, stuck in wherever there was space, leaning on their kickstands at weird angles to one another. Beer cans littered the gutter. It was about 8 in the morning. The sun was already up and blazing, but it wasn't uncomfortably hot yet. I cruised slowly away from the lime green house, down a street perpendicular to it. I found an empty house about 100 yards down, with a clear line of sight to the biker house. I parked and got out, looked around, and grabbed the rifle from the trunk. I wrapped it in a blanket and took it with me around behind the empty house. I found an old garbage can and used it to climb up on the roof. From the roof ridge, I had a clear view to the front door in the biker house. I unwrapped the M14 carefully and spread the blanket over the asphalt shingles. I laid the rifle on the blanket. The metal of the barrel and magazine and the stock's wood were all still cool to the touch. I lay on my belly and settled in for the wait. I'd quit smoking right after I got out of the Marines, so I had nothing to do but think and keep an eye on the house. As I watched, a skinny kid with tattoos on his forearms came out through the garage, shirtless and barefoot. His pants were unbuckled. He had a cigarette in his mouth, which he lit with a silver Zippo. He unzipped his pants and took a piss right alongside the driveway. He zipped up, stretched, and went back in through the garage. Something was bothering me. Something about all this was incredibly familiar. The house, the kid, the car, the bikes. Then it dawned on me. These guys, they were us. This was a one-percenter house, and it looked like every other one-percenter house. Like Animal's house and Slave Louie's house, like Jesse's house. Everybody in that house was proud of the patch on his cut. Every one of them loved the bike he had parked outside. This could just as easily have been a house full of angels, or Mongols, or Vagos, or pagans. I had an epiphany. These guys weren't the enemy. Why would I kill them? If I had grown up in the Midwest, I'd be wearing their patch. If the guys in that house had been born in Encino or Los Angeles, there was a good chance they'd be flying the Death Head. We were the same. I realized we had a common enemy. An enemy that couldn't stand the idea of a bunch of bikers gathering for a run to do their own thing, bothering nobody else. An enemy that had no problem perverting the law they were sworn to uphold, anytime it came to jacking up a rider with a patch. Law enforcement was the enemy of every one-percenter, and always will be. And I was there doing the enemy's work. Hell, if law enforcement had known what I was up to, they wouldn't even have arrested me until I was done. I understood all this. I slowly realized that I was not going to put a 7.62 by 51 round in Big Jim. It made no sense. I wasn't going to do law enforcement's job. I just wasn't. The decision I made on the roof of a dilapidated tract house in some Arizona backwater was the starting point for a diplomacy rare in club life. It would be my mark on the angels and on the one-percenter world. I didn't realize it right then as I bumped up the M14 and climbed down from the roof and quietly drove away. But that decision set the tone for my leadership and my role in the Hells Angels going forward. Sonny was the figurehead, Irish was the brawler, Animal was the crazy one. I would be the peacemaker, and it would cause me no end of grief and trouble. The word diplomacy wasn't in Jesse's dictionary. On a cold night in November 1980, Jesse did what Jesse was built to do. He fought. He got into it with some drunk in a bar in Oakview. He beat the guy to a pulp and bit his ear off for good measure. Jesse was arrested for mayhem, which is assault with great bodily injury. It may sound like an odd charge, but mayhem is taken seriously by the legal system. It can buy you 8 years. After his weapons possession case wound its way through the system, it proved a weak rap to prosecute. It would have smelled a lot like entrapment to any reasonable judge. Jesse agreed to a single-charge guilty plea and probation. Now, with the mayhem charge, he could be violated on the earlier beef and would end up doing time for both. We tapped the club's defense fund for Jesse's bail, and I called a bondsman to arrange Jesse's release. Tom Heath volunteered to pick Jesse up at the jail. Tom would be one of the last people to see Jesse alive. I never asked Tom where he took Jesse, or what he knew about Jesse's death. Those are questions you don't ask in the outlaw world. December 5th, 1980, was a beautiful Friday in Southern California. A retired Superior Court judge took his grandson out for a horseback ride in the Santa Barbara foothills. The ride wound past precise rows of strung-up grape canes that would fill out with wine grapes in a few months. The pair guided their horses slowly across the rolling chaparral-covered slopes at the base of the Santa Ynez Mountains into a shallow canyon. They came to a dry arroyo, and the judge's horse in the lead nearly stumbled on a body that looked like a rag doll that had been tossed aside. Jesse. He had been beaten and strangled. 2 Santa Barbara homicide detectives showed up at the clubhouse to tell me that Jesse was dead. It was the starting point of their investigation. They had already decided the killer or killers was someone from the charter. That's basic math. These guys were not happy because their captain was not happy. The captain was not happy because a retired judge was downright furious that his grandson has been subjected to the horrible sight of a dead biker polluting their pristine riding trail. Shit rolls downhill. Before Jesse's body made it from the morgue to the funeral home, everybody in the charter had been questioned. We didn't give the detectives a full sentence to write in their spiral flip notebooks. They could go fuck themselves. But the lead detective was a clever guy. He did an end around and called Sonny, under the assumption that Sonny would know anything going on in the club anywhere. He was wrong. Sonny didn't know shit about Jesse. They had met maybe once. The detective hit pay dirt just the same. Smart outlaws learn to answer law enforcement investigators with one of 2 replies. Fuck you, I don't talk to cops, or call my lawyer. Sonny, though, he hated cops with a passion. He couldn't stop himself from giving them shit. The detective asks him, did Craig Coon have any enemies in the Hells Angels? Why is it every time we get rid of some shitbag out of the club and he winds up dead, you motherfuckers start knocking on our doors? Go fuck yourself. The detective hung up hearing slot machine bells. He beelined for a judge and got a warrant based on the fact that any member expelled from the club would be considered a liability and a target. Meanwhile, I answered the clubhouse phone, surprised to hear the man I call Ralph on the other end of the line. Sonny didn't call people. People called Sonny. I think I fucked up. What do you mean? He told me what he had said to the detective. Sonny was smart enough to know that he had given the detective the basis for a warrant. But what could I say to him? This was Sonny Barger. If he screwed up, you didn't give him shit about it. We both knew what was coming, though. 2 days later, I was at the clubhouse with Cheryl, Mariah, and Georgie. David Ortega was there, too, with his latest hang-around honey. The clubhouse had a workshop in the back where an entire bike could be taken apart and put back together. I was tinkering with the rocker arms on an old panhead, talking to Mariah. She was perched on a steel work stool while Georgie played with a cluster of valve springs on the floor. My morning tea was just getting cool enough to drink. I took a sip and looked out the window. A caravan of cops was hauling ass down Fick's Way. I sprinted into the front room, where the locked security door was buzzer activated. The cops were already pounding on the door. The girl who had been hanging out with David was headed for the buzzer. Don't let them in! She ignored me and buzzed the door lock open. Santa Barbara sheriffs poured into the clubhouse. Ventura cops stayed outside as observers because it was technically their jurisdiction. The sheriffs wore flak jackets and riot gear. They carried automatic weapons and waved them around like it was a war zone. They were way too amped. They hustled us outside into the bright morning sunlight, heat waves shimmering off the blacktop of the clubhouse parking lot. The crackle of police radios filled the air. The sheriffs ordered us to spread eagle against the clubhouse wall, kids included. This was a violation of 2 unwritten codes, the angels and the cops. I prided myself on keeping my head in tense situations, but I was about to boil over and do something stupid. 2 of these assholes had automatic weapons trained on my children. Fortunately, one of the sheriffs still had an ounce of humanity. I heard him tell the others, "This is too much." He took the kids by the hands and led them out to the Ventura cops, where Sergeant Carl Handy collected them and comforted them. He knew Mariah and Georgie, and more important, they knew him. The lead detective took me inside to execute the actual search. The warrant listed all kinds of documents that might be linked to Jesse's murder. Meeting notes, disciplinary reports, written orders, even photos that had been marked up or scratched out. The Ventura cops had made clear to the Santa Barbara guys to be respectful. Ventura police had to deal with us daily, and they didn't want blowback. The search turned up nothing, except for 4 Valiums I had in the toolbox. The lead detective ignored them. He wasn't there for a misdemeanor drug bust that probably wouldn't have been supported under the terms of the warrant anyway. The harassment didn't stop there. I came out of my house in the morning 2 days later to find 2 sheriffs with my trash spread out on a blue painter's tarp in the middle of my driveway. Trash was a plain view exception to the Fourth Amendment, so they had the right to search it without a warrant. It made me glad that we threw the dog's shit in the trash can. In the end, after months of no-cause traffic stops, blatant and intrusive surveillance, and general harassment, the sheriffs had plenty of suspects, but not one bit of evidence. The last I heard of the investigation was a call from the lead detective. Look, I don't know what you got going on down there, and I don't know how you got this much influence around Ventura, but nobody's talking to us. So hats off to you, George. But I got something to tell you, and I want you to listen real close. Don't dump your trash in Santa Barbara. You tell all those assholes in your gang they find somewhere else to do their littering. Do we understand each other? Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. No, you can go pop a couple of those Valiums and we'll go our separate ways. As far as I'm concerned, the investigation is closed. Jesse's murder had all the signs of an internal hit. There was a lot of suspicion to go around. Whenever someone didn't do the time he should be doing for a crime, or was staring down the barrel of a long jail term, members got concerned that he might roll to go free. It was a legitimate fear. A lot of rats had done just that. George Wethern, an Oakland member in the 60s and 70s, had done just that and tried to pin multiple murders on Sonny before George and his wife disappeared into the witness protection program. I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that Jesse would never have cooperated, but other members didn't know him as well as I did. He never fit in up in Oakland. I believe the mayhem charge caused somebody to worry that 8 years behind bars was enough to make Jesse talk. He knew a lot about what had gone on in the Mongol War and could have told a lot of interesting tales. I think somebody took steps to head off that possibility.
Hope you enjoyed it. I did. Leave a comment, please. Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Till next time, ride safe. Enjoy the ride.